So we are back at Granite City Comic Con, and I am joined by Monty Nero.
Hello.
Again, this is your second year running. You're a veteran now.
Yeah, no, it was great last year, so I was keen to come back.
The entire lifespan of 2 years of the convention.
I'm like a mascot.
We'll put your face on the poster next.
Thank you.
But so if for those who aren't familiar with your work, if you could explain yourself and describe yourself too.
Well, I create the creator-owned comic Death Sentence, and I write it and co-created it with Mike Dowling, who now does Unfollow for Vertigo. And we've carried on developing that. We've got about another 4 graphic novels coming out over the next couple of years with a new artist called Martin Simmons, who's really fantastic. It's going to be a big name in the industry. Slightly different style to how it was before. It's more like fully painted now, but still quite gritty and kind of real. So it was great to find him. And then doing stuff with American companies based on, the fact that they like Death Sentence, which is my own creator-owned sort of written stuff. So doing sort of both at the same time now, which is quite interesting. Tend to do like 2 weeks on one, 2 weeks on another. It's a completely different mindset. So it's been quite a busy time.
Is it tough going between the transition between those two? Is it different sets of muscles, really?
Yeah, it is a little bit. When I first started Death Sentence, I was doing stuff for 2000 AD as well. And what I found with that is it actually takes as long to do a Future Shock as it takes to do an issue of an American comic, which you'd think is surprising. But it's true, because a Future Shock, it's a complete story. It has to have beginning, middle and end, theme, subtext, cunning twist, all that sort of stuff. And you're trying to condense it into 4 pages, which is a lot of work. It takes longer to write a short letter than a long letter, as the saying goes. So I found I had to just stop that, because it was taking too much time to do these little short things. And B, it's a completely different way of working. Like, the feedback I get all the time from the American editors is like, I need to sort of decompress a little bit and put less in each issue and less in each panel. So I've been doing that, and then it's just not compatible with that headspace where you're trying to like do everything in 4 pages or do everything in like a 5-page issue for a 2000 AD story or something. So I just sort of stopped doing that because it wasn't really helping my writing with the sort of longer work, and I think it definitely helped initially because it helps you with the whole sort of how to tell a story stuff. But then also, I do find the first couple of days when I switch between Death Sentence and the other stuff, it's like, it takes me a while to get back into it and kind of figure out where I am and what needs to be done and how to do it.
It must be like night and day going between a 22-page ongoing story and then they said Future Shock, which I remember they were going over it in detail when they had the Thought Bubble competition for them, because it's a 4-page story, like you said.
Yeah.
Start, middle and end in 4 pages. Complete story has to have the entire, has to be so pared down, and like you said, then going from something completely different, even if it's an ongoing where you've got a story that'll span across multiple issues, it's so different.
And that's something I've been learning, because of course when I wrote Death Sentence it was very much a finite thing. I knew it was going to be 6 issues and it had a sort of ending. So it was all like planned out and stuff. And what I've been getting into since then is like this whole business of writing an ongoing story and how do you do that? And sort of figuring out that has been quite interesting creatively. And what I basically learned, I'm going to sum it up very briefly, is, you need a lot less as far as ideas and story and concepts in order to sort of like sustain like a long run of comics than I thought you did. I think certainly a lot of my early stuff has probably got slightly too many ideas packed into it in too short a space. So just brevity really is the key thing, and I'm finding that the work's been going a lot smoother since I've sort of figured that out.
Was it because, like you said, you thought of Death Sentence as a very finite thing? Those 6 issues would, at the end of that, at the conclusion, it would be the proper ending, the conclusion to it all. You continued on with essentially the same characters,
Yeah.
or ones that can continue,
Yeah.
and then transitioned into it being an ongoing. So it wasn't like it was a thematic, it was just in the same universe as a continuation. It was a proper sequel continuation afterwards.
Yeah.
Was that, did you find that difficult to transition with that story that you thought was going to be
it was
ending,
quite tricky, because when we realised there was going to be more Death Sentence, they approached us about changing the ending to the first book, and me and Mike talked about it, and we decided we didn't want to do that because we thought it had a really nice, pure kind of vision to it, and it had a really nice ending. So we stuck with that, and I'm glad we did. But at the same time, when you developing it as to carry on, it sort of gives you a bit of a knotty problem as to how to sort of do that. And basically, the first issue of the new series sets up, how to sets up the world as it's going to be going forward. And it's a really tricky issue to write, because it's got to be a good issue, because it's issue 1 and people need to be excited.
It's a new jumping
about
on
it.
point.
Yeah. It needs to be like perfectly make sense for new readers, but also work for people that read the first book. And you've got to adjust a lot of things from the way you left them into a new place, so that it makes sense going forward. And it's technically quite difficult to do all that in one issue and still be funny and still be entertaining and still have drama and action and all the stuff you need. So the first issue was really hard to write. After that, I think the second issue is actually a better comic than the first issue. It's not as hard or as clever a bit of writing, but it's a better comic. And from then on, because everything's been set up going forward, and then you can just sort of get on and tell the story and, do your action and do your jokes and develop the characters and stuff. I'm quite pleased, actually. I was worried about it, but a lot of people have said they actually prefer the second book to the first book, and the characters have developed really well and got more depth to them and stuff, and that's all stuff I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it was quite challenging. I had ideas for stories in mind as I wrote the first one, but I had no idea how to write an ongoing, so I didn't really know. I realised now the stories I had in mind weren't really suitable, and they caused as many problems as they would have solved. So I had to come up with new kind of stories, and it all just comes from the characters, just thinking about the characters and what they would logically do next, based on the situation they've found themselves in. So,
because I was going to say that it's the thing I found quite surprising about the continuing into London with the same characters was because of the essentially what you've described the plot as the virus, and it gives you 6 months.
Yeah,
that 6 months has to finish at some point.
Yeah.
So there has to be, and there is a predetermined end point to a character's lifespan if they're going to be, one of these central characters that have to face that issue.
And that's really important. You can't undermine that, because then the entire concept is bullshit. It's got to be that after 6 months they die. That's it. They can't. There's no sort of cunning out.
Yeah.
So you've got to keep that as being the core of the book. But given that's the case, if you look at the amount of time in calendar time that the first 6 issues take up, it's a very small amount of time. It's weeks. So you could literally do, 8 graphic novels with each of those characters, and they'd still credibly, not be dead yet. So it's not like, and that's what I'm talking about. You realise that actually to tell an ongoing story, you need kind of less stuff than you think you do. So that's been quite interesting to discover. Yeah,
so it was kind of a conclusion, but it wasn't this finite conclusion that you needed to have at the end. It was just sort of exploring these characters in that situation and continuing through in that sort of way.
Yeah.
And going through this process, we've said, it came up multiple times yesterday during the panels, that the best way to get other work in comics is just creating comics yourself. It's producing comics, and you've said yourself it's opened a lot of doors for you in terms of working for other companies or working on other work. Has it also as well as getting you that work in specific ways, how has it informed how you now tackle that work? Because obviously you said it's very different working on your own stuff and then working on something that has to follow someone else's universe or someone else's sort of guidelines.
Well, the writing of the scripts is pretty straightforward. I think the problem I had, and I think the problem a lot of people have, when they've written something that's good and people like it, and then they say, okay, do you want to do something for us? The problem then is how do you pitch stuff? And people don't talk about pitching. There's no panels about pitching or anything really. it's not really discussed in the way that, the craft of script writing or the craft of drawing a comic is. But it's actually really, really important because it's how you get work. So I had no idea how to pitch stuff, really, because I'd never pitched Death Sentence. I just started making it. And you're showing people pages, and they're going like, "Oh wow, these are great pages. I love this concept. Let's see some more." So, and that is actually a way you can pitch. Sometimes you can pitch by just giving people pages and saying, "Look, this is what I'm thinking." But that's quite a long-winded way of doing it. Again, what I've discovered is like pitches need to be really, really short and really, really simple. I mean, clever and like, wow, like this is going to be awesome, but you've got to boil it down into a very, very small amount of space, and much, much shorter than you might think. And then, if people like it, then you can start developing it and talking about it, with a company and stuff, and getting an artist on board, and you sort of develop it together. So the initial pitch, it can be very short, which is good. Now I know that. It's like great. I can write like 30 pitches a month and send them off to people. So whereas when I started and people said, "Okay, have you got any ideas for our characters?" I think like, right, I've got to figure out like, a year's worth of stories for these characters or something, and it would take me ages, and it'd be very complicated, and it'd be like way too long for the editor to read, and a little bit baffling as to what it's just way too much information basically. So I've learned that's probably the biggest thing I've learned, sort of going from doing my own stuff to doing stuff for like Marvel and DC and other companies and things like that.
Well, it's I never even thought of the sort of pitching angle of it, but that's again come back to the Future Shot competition. That's what you essentially had to do in that competition. You weren't given any, you weren't allowed to have any visual aids. It was, you had 4 or 5 minutes, and you had to just sell the idea, sell the story.
That's happened as well.
Would give you the Future Shot.
Yeah, the editor of the X-Men literally just rang me up out of the blue. Well, no, he emailed to say he was going to ring me up in like half an hour. So I was like, oh, cool. And then he just started chatting on the phone, and I thought it was just going to be an exploratory chat. And he just says like, "So I've got these like annuals, and I'm thinking this character or that character. Have you got any ideas?" And it's like, you're right on the spot there, aren't you? so you can't say no. So you just start talking about the characters. And that's another thing I've learned with these companies, is they're really, really interested in character. The focus is very much on character. I've pitched stuff to companies, and they've said, like, that's a brilliant story, really great story. I mean, edge of the seat kind of stuff, but I don't get any sense of what you're going to do with this character. And the character's in the story and he's doing all this cool stuff, but I don't get a sense of how you're going to handle the character. So they're really, really interested in character. And the reason why I got that X-Men job was because I just started talking about Storm and how I saw her and how I thought she'd behave and how she'd react to things and how that would manifest through her powers and stuff. And I was basically just, rambling, because I didn't, it just rang me up.
You were put on the spot.
Yeah, I didn't have a story. I didn't have a plot worked out or anything. And the guy just really liked my handle on the character. He liked the take that I had on the character, and he thought it would be cool. And then after that, he just said, "Okay, well, come up with a story that does all those things with the character." So it was all about character, and I found that with a lot of the editors, is they're really focused on character and how you're going to do something new with a character and what sort of feel it will have, and all that sort of stuff, much more than action or story. Or I think they basically think like, okay, if we put one of our artists on this, it's going to be great action. They can just do that without the writer. Almost, it's more like the writer needs to bring that thematic kind of tone to it and something a bit different. Yeah,
it sounds like when how very much with comics, when a new writer or a new team comes onto a book, it's always about how they've changed or how things are different.
Yeah.
Generally, if it's more about because that's the thing, comics in general, especially superhero comics, there's always going to be an element of action. There's always going to be an element of who the villain is, this sort of thing. But so the only, other than the art direction, in terms of writing it, that's what it is, isn't it? It's your kind of spin on the character.
Yeah, increasingly, everything's got to be new. Increasingly, the days where you just have the X-Men rolling on for 700 issues have gone. and everything's got to be new, like pretty much every 6 months. And everyone moans about it, but at the same time, the reason that happens is because people don't buy the comics
it's because
beyond a year or something. It always tails off. So that's why you get people like Mark Millar, who just sort of always bringing out a new series rather than just carrying on with 1 or 2 series all the time and developing those worlds. It's like a new series sort of every year at least. And he's got loads and loads and loads of new series. So, and Marvel, it's like all new this character or all new that character. It's kind of, everything's got to be a new kind of take, a new angle to get people interested in buying the comics. So, yeah, that's the way the business has gone. And I realise now that's what a lot of people liked about Death Sentence. It was this brand new thing with a brand new angle and a brand new feel. So it's difficult to keep people focused on, even if they're people that really like it, because there's so many new shiny things out since Death Sentence came out, and it's like, well, why? I could either buy that brilliant looking new thing, or I could keep on buying Death Sentence. So it's quite challenging to keep people's attention.
And Death Sentence London, the graphic has just come out for that.
The new one, London, as a book,
and that's just come out now as well. But is there can you talk about anything else you've got on the horizon, or?
Well, there's two more Death Sentence novels after that, Revolt, and I'm not sure what the fourth one is going to be called. It might be called Revolution, but I heard that the only areas Titan get involved in is they get involved with the titles and they get involved with their covers. That's the only areas they're involved in, because they consider that's their area of expertise, like how to sell these things with the titles and the covers and stuff. So everything else is just exactly the way that I want to do it. So not sure what the fourth one is going to be told, but I've written all those and very happy with them. Spent quite a lot of time making sure they were good, and the art's just being done. Martin's about halfway through the next book, so that'll be coming out soon. And then I'm doing these other things, but I can't really talk about those at the moment because just the way the companies work, they really don't like you talking about them. It's like I said, everything's got to be new. So they'll announce it when it's announced, and then it will be new and shiny and exciting, and it's like, oh, I just did this yesterday. When in fact, I've been working on it a while.
Okay, that's perfect. That's a good point to stop. But thank you very much for that, Monty.
No worries. Thanks.